Subintel. Is this another of the Bush-Clinton death trail? The US diplomat Joseph Wilson, who defied President George W. Bush over the decision to go to war with Iraq, has died this week, aged 69. Now, in 2003, Mr. Wilson disproved allegations used by the Bush administration as grounds for invasion that then Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein had brought uranium in Niger. Now, the Brits were selling that for a start, and all kinds of other weaponry. What you got to remember is they were given, and both America and Britain were given Saddam Hussein weapons to fight Iran. So that's how they deliberately set them up. They'll start off with one thing. Essentially, the US military wanted to go into Iraq and Iran over the oil and other resources there. Now, days later, his then wife Valerie Plame, remember here, was outed as a CIA agent in what some saw as an act of political revenge. He and Ms. Plame later divorced in 2017, and she told the Washington Post that her ex-husband had died of organ failure in a hospice in New Mexico where they both lived. 69. Now, as an acting ambassador to Iraq in the run-up to the first Gulf War in 1991, he was the last US diplomat to meet Saddam Hussein. And in 2002, by then a private citizen, Mr. Wilson was sent by the CIA on a fact-finding mission to Niger to investigate reports that Iraq had bought a nuclear material, uranium yellow cake, which the Brits had sent in. Now, Mr. Wilson concluded that the reports were false, but 11 months later they reappeared on Bush's State of the Union address. Why? Because the Bush family ran the CIA and they wanted to collect more oil, as you now all know. You know, this type of skullduggery, we've covered some from Russia with Love, 7 this week, but also the fact that Israel, with dual citizen Americans, gave Iran nuclear weapons in 1984. And this is how they work. They give Saddam Hussein loads of weapons to fight Iran. They also give Osama bin Laden, who was a CIA agent, weapons to fight Russia in Afghanistan. Then they decide to turn on them. But it's all fake. It was nothing to do with Hussein and nothing to do with Osama bin Laden either. It's just expansion. And the sooner people see through that illusion, the better. Well, they were used as evidence that Iraq was attaining weapons of mass destruction and justification for the 2003 war. And in July of that year, the former diplomat wrote in the New York Times, "I have little choice but to conclude that some of the intelligence," misnomer that, related to Iraq's nuclear weapons program was twisted to exaggerate the Iraqi threat. And the following week, conservative columnist Robert Novak reported that part of the reason Mr. Wilson had been given the Niger mission was that his wife, a CIA agent, recommended him. All jobs for the boys and girls, you see. And Ms. Plame, whose work required secrecy, was forced to resign from the service after she was outed. Like I said, act of revenge against Mr. Wilson by not the Bush administration, but they were being ran by Cheney and Langley. And like I said, the show on Tuesday uncovered that they're involved in world issues far more than people realise. The CIA I'm talking about. And I'm hoping this government reins them in. We have to. Because it would be on real grounds, not fake, real grounds for national security to rein them in. They need to be reined in. Cut their funding. Fox News radio host and commentator Todd Starnes has been ousted from the network this week, and his website, contract and premium subscription service Fox Nation, the company notified the news on yesterday. He made headlines as recently as Monday for comments during his radio program that the Democrats do not believe in the Christian God and instead worship Moloch, a pagan god, it is stated, often associated with child sacrifice. And Fox confirmed yesterday that Starnes is no longer working at the network, but did not elaborate on the reasons behind his departure. I wonder if Mr. Starnes listens to THI. It's not often a politician comes out with stuff like that, alt media stuff. And we've covered the Moloch story and the owl quite extensively. I'm not the only one, but it is perhaps more recent. But the only problem Mr. Starnes has is it applies to both parties, not just the Democrats. Both are involved in it, not just one. Now, the reason it is an owl that they worship is the Egyptian word for owl is Moloch. The symbolism and word magic is being unwound. More banking fraud. I expect this to increase, as we seem to be covering it each week now, which is not a surprise. Mexican authorities are investigating a massive fraud scheme involving a bank that is widely used by American retirees who have moved to Mexico. And according to officials with Monex, say that about $40 million has been reported missing from 158 accounts. I told you they'd start stealing from people's accounts. One couple who was scammed out of their life savings shared their story with NBC this week. Kathy and Jim Mashia retired and moved from San Diego to San Miguel de Allende, which is a small mountain town about 4 hours northwest of Mexico City. And the Mashias worked with Marcela Zavella Taylor, a former banker with Grupo Financiero Monex, to deposit their funds into the bank account. And the couple says Taylor was always responsive when they needed money. She would either have the funds wired to them or would dispatch her assistant to deliver an envelope filled with pesos. But in December, the Mashias needed money to pay their contractors and contacted Taylor, but this time they didn't hear back from her and contacted Monex. And the bank told them their money was gone and they had just a few pesos left in their account. She said it gives you a sense of ultimate betrayal, loss and horror. And dozens of people then came forward and said they were scammed out of money by Taylor and Monex, and they had no idea their accounts were empty because they kept receiving fraudulent statements from the bank. Now, the bank apparently is working with retirees and has offered to reimburse them if they press charges with the Procuraduría General de Justicia in Mexico City and name Taylor in their complaint. In other words, don't blame the bank. And legal action is continuing in the case and details cannot be disclosed as to not hinder the investigation. And the bank is working with clients and has settled with 70%, not 100%, 70%, just like that. You know, as mentioned earlier, rising home prices coupled with conservative borrowing have today's homeowners sitting on a record amount of potential cash, and they're going to seduce people to create more. Don't do it. Keep your equity. Don't do it. This is how they wrap people in, because there is another crash going to come, and the interest rates will go up should that happen. A huge amount. And this is what they did in 2005, 6 and 7. You've got some capital, let's give you some of that capital, and all these fancy seducement advertisements, and people go, ooh, yeah, we'll get 20, 30, 40,000 and we'll buy a car, go on a vacation, and then boom, becomes bust. And this is what they're pushing you with now. Today's mortgage holders saw their home equity increase by 4.8% annually at the end of the second quarter, and this is a collective gain of nearly 428 billion. So you can see why they're asking people to borrow some of that, because of course they then claim 9 times the amount that you borrow. Let's not do that. Break it down by borrower, and the average homeowner with a mortgage gained $4,900 in home equity in just 1 year. Didn't tell you what they lost the previous decade, did they? Borrower equity rose to an all-time high in the first half of 2019 and more than doubled since the housing recovery started. Combined with low mortgage rates, this rise in home equity supports spending on home improvements and may help improve balance sheets of households who could take out home equity loans to consolidate their debt. No, don't do it. This is a report of refugees. And again, fairly staggering. And again, statistics are not what you were led to believe. More than 35,000 people were forced to flee their homes every single day in 2018. 1 every 2 seconds. And we're complaining in the Western world of our problems. Taking the world's displaced population now to a record 71 million, which is more than the whole population of the UK. A total of 26 million have fled across borders. 41 million are displaced within their home countries, and 3.5 million have sought asylum, the highest number ever. Why are so many people being driven away from their families, friends and neighbourhoods? Wars have contributed to the highest rise. Conflict and violence, persecution and human rights violations are driving more and more men, women and children from their homes. In fact, the number of displaced people has doubled in the last 10 years, with wars in Iraq, Syria and other regions causing many families to leave their communities. Also conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Yemen and South Sudan, as well as the flow of Rohingya refugees from Myanmar and to Bangladesh, have also had a similar and significant impact. Now, contrary to Portal people opinions about refugees, 4 out of 5 would prefer to stay in their own country. In fact, it's a bit higher than 4 out of 5. Just over 90% would rather live in their own country and not to be sent to far foreign lands. as covers for other rogue elements to install themselves into the theatre of operations. Hope you understand what I just said, because that's what's going on. Jakobshavn Glacier in Western Greenland is notorious for being the world's fastest moving glacier, and it's also one of the most active, discharging a tremendous amount of ice from the Greenland ice sheet into Ilulissat ice fjord and adjacent Disco Bay, with implications for alleged sea level rise. And the image shows that was acquired on June the 6th this year by the operational land imager, shows a natural colour view of the glacier, and they've spent decades in retreat. That is, until scientists observed an unexpected advance of the glacier starting in 2016. It's near quadrupled on the one photograph that I saw. In addition to growing towards the ocean, the glacier was found to be slowing and also thickening. Oops. And new data collected in March 2019 confirmed that the glacier has grown for the third year in a row, and scientists attribute the change to cool ocean waters. But I thought everything was getting hotter. And they also reported for the third straight year that the glacier was thickening. And they're now saying they come to the conclusion that the ocean is the culprit. Well, it makes a change from people. What are we going to have next? An ocean tax. I wouldn't rule it out. As predicted, though, everything is moving away from the traditional sites of glaciers and ice packs into new regions. This is what's taking place. Climate change, my ass. No, it's natural planetary change. Listen closely. To accommodate movement of the planet towards being back on its axis. The Trump White House announced they had to upgrade the security of National Security Council's top secret code word system in the spring of 2018. This was released this week. I remember mentioning it on the show. According to two former Trump White House officials familiar with the matter, as part of an effort, it was said, to ferret out and deter leaks. And the changes included a new log of who accessed specific documents in the NSC system known as NIS or NSC, Intelligence Collaboration Environment, and was designed in part to prevent leaks of records of the president's phone calls with foreign leaders and to find out the suspected leaker if transcripts did get disclosed. Prior to the upgrade, officials could only see who had uploaded or downloaded material to the system, but usually not who accessed which documents. For those of you with long memories, that was in the Intel early last year. You all know how it came about, and you all know who was involved in it. Last sub-Intel piece, another positive news. There's awful lot going on in the background to do with trafficking, drugs, Bitcoin server, fake accounts, and also genetic issues. And they finally released some of it, of what's been going on. The US federal agents raided genetic testing laboratories this week, and 35 people were criminally charged in 4 states in a crackdown on genetic testing fraud that officials said on Friday caused $2.1 billion in losses to federal healthcare insurance programs. That's not the only reason. And the use of genetic testing, which helps people determine their risks of developing cancer and other diseases, according to them, has skyrocketed in the US since 2015. For Medicare, the public insurance program for elderly and disabled Americans, payouts for genetic tests jumped from $480 million in 2015 to $1.1 billion in 2018. Another racketeering scam. And genetic testing sparked more than 300 federal investigations involving healthcare fraud and illegal kickbacks. But many of the lab tests are not relevant to the patient's history, and some of the doctors sign off on the results without conferring with the patient, investigators say. That's another giant racket that has to be stripped down and started again. The whole health industry is beyond a joke in this country.